This is Channel 5, your 24-hour news source.
Good morning, I'm Robin George. Saddam Hussein has called an emergency meeting today of Iraq's National Assembly. It's now less than 2 days before the UN deadline for Iraq to pull out from Kuwait. Russian Federal President Boris Yeltsin is calling on Russian soldiers to ignore orders to attack citizens of Lithuania. And today, Jim Edgar is sworn in as Illinois' new governor. More news later.
And you're only 10 minutes away from the Persian Gulf on WMAQ Radio.
This is Channel 5, your 24-hour news source.
As war clouds darken in the Persian Gulf tonight, thousands of foreigners are leaving Israel, including the wives and children of U.S. diplomats. And in the Chicago area, the latest group of reservists ship out. Good evening, I'm Carol Marine.
And I'm Ron Majors. Channel 5's Steve Handelsman in live in Washington for the latest on what's happening there. Hello, Steve.
Hello, Ron, Carol, and good evening. Here at the White House tonight, there is still hope for some kind of a breakthrough. Perhaps the beginning of an Iraqi retreat, which the administration now says would delay an American attack. But so far tonight, there is no Iraqi retreat, and the mood here is glum. The president returned from Camp David to the White House, where he will remain now as the deadline approaches. So far, the Iraqis have not blinked.
It doesn't surprise me, but they're making a tremendous mistake.
What does Bush say to Americans who are not ready for war?
Well, I think that matter was resolved when the Congress acted yesterday, and I tell them the same thing I've told the American people over and over again. I say we've got to do what we have to do.
The president's top aides came to the White House tonight to ponder the latest, but there isn't much. No word from the UN Secretary General on his trip to Baghdad. Javier Perez de Cuellar had been kept waiting 6 hours by Saddam. After their meeting, he said he'd brought no new UN peace plan and cannot predict if war will come.
Well, as you know, that is, it is a question which is almost impossible to answer.
As the deadline approaches, the Senate Majority Leader senses disaster.
The casualties will be Americans, the deaths will be Americans, the cost will be American. No one should be under any illusions about that.
Bush knows there's no time now for a complete Iraqi withdrawal. He's hopeful but wary of a partial retreat. Chief of Staff Sununu.
The key right now is to make sure that what is done is not another ploy, but truly a withdrawal in a quick, timely, and effective way.
In Baghdad, Saddam vowed he would never retreat, but there was one ray of hope. Saddam summoned his National Assembly to an emergency meeting for tomorrow. Now, that rubber stamp body has been used in the past by Saddam Hussein as a cover for concessions. So one last hope here tonight is that that's what tomorrow's session is about. That's it from the White House. This is Steve Handelsman, Channel 5 News. Ron and Carol, back to you.
Thank you, Steve. While hopes for peace grow dim, forces gathered for Operation Desert Shield are coping with the elements, coping and waiting. Channel 5's Peter Ford is with the troops in Saudi Arabia as they prepare for war.
The ominous clouds of war have been gathering over the Persian Gulf for months now. Today, rain clouds that have been gathering since Friday opened up and saturated the desert.
The rain is a mixed blessing. It settles the abrasive dust and sand that grinds up the insides of jet turbines and the leading edges of helicopter blades. But it also leaves sheets of water on runways and slows down the ICT, the Integrated Combat Turnaround.
The turnarounds are the high-speed pit stops fighter aircraft make during combat to refuel and load fresh ammunition and missiles. U.S. crews here can do it now in less than 30 minutes, but rain would slow that time. Foot soldiers say the rain won't affect their fighting ability.
You're not as comfortable, you know, your sleeping bags may get wet or damp, things like that, but otherwise we're still ready.
These troops are heading north today, towards the front. Most of them heard the news this weekend about the vote in Congress to support President Bush.
I'm personally thrilled about it. I think we all are. I think it's the kind of support that we need for all our folks over here.
While the specter of war hangs over everyone here, the news from Washington appears to have been a boost to troop morale that not even today's rain could dampen.
That's exactly the way a democracy should work. Stand behind the president and support him with everything you got.
Reporting from Saudi Arabia, I'm Peter Ford, Channel 5 News.
As the clock ticks closer to the deadline, as diplomats try to find a way to peace, and as troops prepare for war, people around the world voiced their feelings. Thousands of anti-war protesters marched in Bonn, Germany, thousands more in Madrid, Spain. And in other places, there were prayers for peace and songs of hope. Hundreds of people gathered in a high school stadium in Hinesville, Georgia. Hinesville is near the Army's Fort Stewart, and the town has been hard hit by the Persian Gulf crisis. Here in the Chicago area, there were prayers for peace and some protests against war. Channel 5's Jackie Bang has that part of the story from Oak Park.
Members of Citizens Against Desert Shield chose to protest in front of a West Side Armed Forces Recruiting Center. Once again, their main speaker was mayoral candidate Danny Davis. He compared the impoverished West Side to a war zone. His prayers were for those residents who were recruited here.
They joined up with the hope that this was a way out.
Yes, sir.
They did not join up with the understanding that they would be sent to the desert, never to return.
There were political potshots as well. Their anger was directed toward the man who now has the power to bring the U.S. into war.
It is unfair for the American public to have their boys in the desert sands and George Bush's son running across this country ripping off savings and loans. Yeah.
And at Holy Name Cathedral, more pleas for peace. Cardinal Bernardine called for a day of prayer. This Mass was dedicated to that cause.
Well, let us not be silent. Let's speak the
In Oak Park tonight, residents spoke out against war. Nearly 300 attended the town meeting. More words of anger directed toward President Bush. More fears of a confrontation.
I hope that if we do go in, which I pray to God every day we won't, that it will be quick and we will get out of there with as little amount of bloodshed as possible.
With the deadline only 2 days away and the Congress giving President Bush the authority to use force, some would say war is inevitable. So why hold these town meetings and peace rallies? Well, the folks here and other activists would say they still believe their voices do mean something. Jackie Bang, Channel 5 News.
Of all those who are organizing to stop the war, a group with the most at stake is the military families whose loved ones are expected to fight. Channel 5's Paul Hogan is live in Washington, where military mothers and fathers are organizing this week. Paul?
Well, Carol, really it is the moms and dads of the American soldiers who are in Saudi Arabia or on their way there who are forming the most heartbreaking coalition against the war. They plan protests, demonstrations, a vigil really, outside the White House here tomorrow, and, of course, nationwide. The Chicago protest will be led by a businesswoman who was here this weekend organizing.
This is one American who's stood up and been counted.
Jerry Shearer is a corporate recruiter in Chicago. Her 22-year-old son, Eric, is a Marine Lance Corporal in helicopter training. Mrs. Shearer was among hundreds of military families who descended on Washington this weekend to lobby against the Gulf War and organize a national network of mothers and fathers like themselves.
And there's so many people that are against this war. There's so many people that anticipate this loss. There's so many people that are terrified of what the precedent we're going to start, a terror that may not end for years.
She says no American should have to fight to restore the autocratic government of Kuwait, something the Kuwaiti ambassador told me is not the case.
Well, we're not talking about preserving my government. It's preserving sovereignty of a nation and people who have been driven out by a dictator and threatening the whole nations in the area. And I mean the whole nations in the area. That includes even the nations in the West.
But you understand there are a lot of Americans who don't want blood spilled for your government, your country.
Why are you referring always to my government?
But I was very proud to stand on the Capitol steps and hold up my son's picture. Because if he ends up dying, I will at least know in my heart that I did something, or tried to.
Before she left to fly home to Chicago, Mrs. Shearer paid her first visit to this city's most popular monument.
I don't want to see my son's name on a wall like that one. I'd rather speak up now than lose my son, my only child. If and when he dies, it'll be too late.
Mrs. Shearer will not be here tomorrow when the other moms and dads of some of those in Saudi Arabia demonstrate. Instead, she's on her way back to Chicago right now to take part in a similar ceremony in suburban Oak Park. Paul Hogan reporting live from Washington.
Thanks, Paul. And at this hour, the first Air Force Reserve unit to be activated from O'Hare and deployed in Saudi Arabia is on the way to the Persian Gulf. Channel 5's Sharon Wright was at this morning's farewell.
9 a.m. O'Hare Field. Commander Jack Gingrich salutes and bids farewell to the 34 men and women on board this air transport headed to the Mideast. But this day would begin well before dawn.
Staff Sergeant Ken Wilson.
Right here.
Packed and ready with so many last-minute thoughts on their minds. Their mission, treat and airlift the wounded. Sergeant Ken Wilson, a medical technician from Matson.
Going through my mind is what's coming ahead. You know, I'm thinking about that. Also thinking about my family.
And saying their goodbyes. Daughters, sons giving hugs that must last months, perhaps longer. Staff Sergeant Wanda Wild says in real life she's a full-time mom.
I just told Mikey that I have to go away and I don't know when I'll get back.
When you see those like Wanda, you can't help but think that for them, this walk across the snow-covered airfield is one of their longest and most emotional. Tomorrow, they will touch down at their final destination somewhere in Saudi Arabia. As Ken Wilson mouths a coming back over the roar, they leave knowing prayers for their safe return go with them. Sharon Wright, Channel 5 News.
On this final Sunday before potential warfare in the Middle East, prayers for peace were said at worship services across the nation. Here in Chicago, pictures of servicemen and women stationed in Saudi Arabia filled the altar at Holy Angels Church. The soldiers' brothers and sisters placed photos of their loved ones as Father George Clements read their names and prayed for their safety.
And Arab leaders are making some last-minute appeals for peace. Saudi Arabia's King Fahd is urging Saddam Hussein to withdraw from Kuwait, as is Syria's President Hafez Assad. And among those endorsing the pleas for Hussein to leave was Libya's Colonel Muammar Gaddafi.
Still to come on the Channel 5 News, Chicago's Lithuanian community condemns yesterday's bloody Soviet crackdown.
And from Springfield, we'll have a live interview with Governor-elect Jim Edgar.
Thousands of Lithuanians in the capital city of Vilnius defied a Soviet-imposed curfew tonight surrounding the parliament to protect it from attack. Channel 5's Derek Blakely has a look at the stunning events in Lithuania and reaction here in Chicago.
A column of Soviet troops and tanks attacked the Lithuanian Broadcast Center in a bloody attempt to silence the voice of dissent. Thousands in the streets chanted, "Gorbachev, give back your Nobel Peace Prize." But moral force proved no match for military force. At least 13 died, shot or crushed by tanks, with more than 100 injured. President Bush condemned the crackdown, but stopped short of enacting punitive measures.
At this hour, the United States and the West will redouble our efforts to strengthen and encourage peaceful change in the Soviet Union.
In Moscow, reports hinted Gorbachev may not have approved the show of force, but demonstrators in Red Square doubted that.
I cannot imagine that he knows nothing about this.
Lithuanian Americans meeting in Chicago called for economic sanctions against the Soviets while blaming Gorbachev for the carnage.
He doesn't want to get blamed for what he's doing. He's the man that is there and has the full responsibility of the blood of the Lithuanian people on his hands. We hold him accountable.
With world attention focused on the Persian Gulf, Lithuanian nationalists fear that Gorbachev's gamble may pay off. The Soviet leader may be able to continue talking about reform while practicing repression in Lithuania. Derek Blakely, Channel 5 News.
Lithuanian nationalists are appealing for donations of medical supplies. The Soviets all but cut off medical shipments when the sanctions against Lithuania began back in the spring.
That show of Soviet force in Lithuania is creating fear in the neighboring Baltic republics of Latvia and Estonia. Some 200 Latvians rallied in their capital city today in a show of support for Lithuania. Latvia and Estonia are committed to regaining their pre-World War II independence, as is Lithuania. Some Latvian officials fear their country might now be invaded by Soviet troops.
This is Inauguration Eve in Springfield. Governor Jim Thompson gets ready to leave office, and Governor-elect Jim Edgar gets ready to take over. Tonight, the Illinois Inaugural Committee gave a candlelight dinner for 500 guests in the Capitol Rotunda. For both Edgar and Thompson, it was a special evening, the last night before one takes the reins of government, the last night for the other to let go.
So for Governor-elect Jim Edgar, he's now just hours away from taking command of the state. He takes the oath of office tomorrow at noon.
Channel 5's political editor Dick Kay, live in Springfield with Mr. Edgar. Dick?
Ron and Carol, we are here with Governor-elect Jim Edgar, and I guess one of the last times I can call you Mr. Secretary. Has it hit you yet? I mean, all of the ceremony has probably kept you occupied, but has it hit you yet, the awesome responsibility you're about to undertake?
Well, I don't think really until I probably get on my desk a major crisis, and instead of waiting for the governor to act, I'm going to then realize everybody's looking at me because I am the governor and I have to act. So I don't really think it'll probably hit till I'm behind that desk.
You have some of the most awesome pieces of legislation facing you that we've seen in probably 20 years. School reform, tax reform, income tax surcharge, redistricting. Are you ready for that?
Oh, I'm ready for those. Now, whether or not the General Assembly will agree with me, we'll have to wait and see. But those are issues that I feel pretty comfortable in dealing with, issues that I've been involved in before. But the nuances of trying to get everyone together to reach a compromise so we can solve those problems, that's going to be I think, the challenge.
The big thing we have seen with Jim Thompson and his style is symmetry. Let's get the leaders together. Will you hope to continue that, to be able to continue those kinds of relationships with legislative leaders? Speaker Madigan has already said, well, the governor's got to introduce the income tax surcharge freeze.
Well, I think I can work with the legislature, and it's important that the governor and the legislature works close together. Now, whether you do it with a summit or you do it with individual meetings or however, you have to work very closely. And I'm a product of the legislative process, so I appreciate that they're co-equal, and it takes a partnership, and that means take some compromise, give and take, and we're ready to do that. I'm sure we'll be able to work together.
Mayor Daley said the other day that he supports the keeping of the income tax surcharge, but Speaker Madigan said, I'm not convinced, and Jim Edgar is going to have to introduce the legislation. Are you prepared to introduce the legislation to keep the income tax surcharge?
I think everyone knows I support it. That was a major issue in the campaign, and I can't introduce it. I'm not a legislator.
But your party can.
Well, that, or I think there's some Democratic legislators, too. I'd hope it'd be bipartisan. It's going to take bipartisan to pass it. Well, most issues are going to take bipartisan support.
Governor, thank you for joining us. We wish you luck, and we hope it sinks in soon.
Well,
Governor,
I'm sure it'll hit me tomorrow.
Governor-elect Jim Edgar, back to you. Ron and Carol.
Thanks to the both of you, and we'll have coverage of the inauguration tomorrow on our noon news.
Still ahead on the Channel 5 News at 10, can we expect a work week warm-up? The forecast is next.
And then a bit later on, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. remembers. Marie Michelini's here for a look at the weather.
And I've got a big treat for both of you. This could be our warmest spell of 1991. Tomorrow, temperatures should scoot up towards 40 degrees. A big warm spell for maybe 1.5 days. And then the cold will be back upon us. Today, we got up to a high of 29. That's right up there where we should be for this time of year. Presently at O'Hare, we're scooting around 31 degrees, 32 at Midway, Lakefront 32, Gary 30, Aurora also 30, and the wind chill's at 5 because of the strong southerly winds at 20 miles per hour. Now, as we put the satellite map into motion, we're watching this area of clear skies over the western states. This will be our clearing for tomorrow. We'll see some sun tomorrow. It'll be mixed with a few clouds, but no snow. In fact, for the next 5 days, it looks as though we'll have no precipitation. The cold air will scoot through tonight with the system, and the warm air will be with us tomorrow. But tonight we are socked under the heavy cloud cover. As we look westward, all the clearing will be coming in for tomorrow. Just a few clouds out there for tomorrow. You should see the sunshine, but don't forget to dress warm. It will be chilly in the morning hours. And it'll be raining across the southern plain states and up through the northwest, some snow there. Our highs tomorrow scooting right up towards 40 degrees. We'll probably stay in the upper 30s, possibly the low 40s right along the lakefront. And our forecast for the rest of tonight, partly cloudy and breezy, 27 to 32 degrees, the low temperatures. Tomorrow morning as you head back to school or work, 30 to 34 degrees. As I said, dress warmly, but by tomorrow afternoon, a pretty nice day, the nicest one we've seen so far this year, 35 to 40. Also on the windy side, so don't forget to hold on to your hats. For the next 5 days, we're looking for a 39 tomorrow and partly sunny. For Tuesday, clouds 35, and then we're going back down to where temperatures really should be for this time of year. The good news is no precipitation, and hopefully we'll hold right above that freezing mark of 32 degrees, 33, 34. No complaints from you two.
That's a treat.
We'll be quiet. Thank you, Marie. Still ahead on the Channel 5 News, it's the end of the line for the Bears.
And the Blackhawks turn out the lights on the North Stars.
Big day in sports. Mark Greco here with some of the highlights.
Well, one of those nice seasons, terrible endings. Mike Ditka's already looking ahead to next year, though, as today's jolt of reality in New Jersey showed him exactly how far his Bears have to go. Jeff Hostetler just killed him, both passing and running. Here a dart to Stephen Baker in the end zone. They've been picking on Vesti all day long. And then the infamous play of the year. In lieu of the field goal, they go for it on fourth, and Brad Muster is stuffed. And that really demoralized the Bears at that point. End of a nice season for Mike Ditka. End of a great 12-year career for Danimal Dan Hampton as the Bears bow out 31-3.
We'll be back. I'm proud of what they accomplished. To a single man, everybody tried hard this year. We came from a very dismal season in '89 to winning the Central Division and being respectable. Now we got to find out if we can jump up into the upper plateau with the teams that are up there. But I'm proud of the guys, and today is not going to take any of the luster off the season we had. It's just that we made a better football team when they beat us. So I don't really know that I can say much else.
There isn't much else to say. Coming up in minutes, though, Tom Scher from New York, the AFC semifinal between the Raiders and Bengals, and, of course, Steve McMichael one more time, all on Sports Sunday. At the stadium right now, the Blackhawks and the North Stars going at it. Chris Chelios in the first, out to Jeremy Roenick, who flies in behind the cage and makes John Casey's head spin. That made it 1-0 Hawks. And then it was 1-1 later in the first. A freak goal here. Bob McGill shot from the point, deflects off David Gagne's stick and goes right over Casey's shoulder into the net. It's 2-1 Hawks. Second period tied at 2. The Hawks explode for 2 quick power play goals. Look at this. Larmer to Creighton. Wraps it around in front of Casey. It is now 5-3 Blackhawks, and they're in the third. Elsewhere, Brett Hull scored again. St. Louis beat Montreal. The Rangers over Hartford. Edmonton down Philadelphia. The Islanders beat Quebec 4-3. Winnipeg over Calgary by the same 4-3 count. As far as basketball is concerned, the Bulls host Milwaukee in a big one at the stadium tomorrow night. Only one game in the NBA tonight, the Nets and the Blazers, and this is street ball at its best, or at its worst, depending on how you like it. Look at this. Mad scramble, volleyball, fast break, down the other end. Just throw it up, bang it around. Finally, it gets kicked out, stolen to Reggie Theus, who puts it in the hole, but Portland wins it 116-103. Sports Sunday in a couple of minutes. We'll wrap up this whole season nicely.
Good. Thanks, Mark. And we'll have more in just a moment. Stay tuned.
Live from the NBC Tower, this is Sports Sunday, the complete wrap-up of today's Bears game, plus all the action around the NFL. Sports Sunday with Mark Greco and the Bears' Steve McMichael.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our final Bears edition of Sports Sunday. Well, the comeback season came to an abrupt end today as the Giants buried the Bears in the swampland of East Rutherford, New Jersey. Picking up in the first, Mike Tomczak, who didn't play all that badly, fires to Dennis Gentry. Off his hands, right to Mark Collins. The Bears with the first big turnover of the game. And how often do you see Pinky do that? That sets up Matt Barr's big foot. 47 yards. He gets all of it and ricochets the thing off the upright. It's good. Bill Parcells has a 3-0 lead at this point. Jeff Hostetler was something else. Launches a perfect missile to Stephen Baker in the end zone. Vesti was victimized all day. That made it 10-0 Giants. And in the second quarter, the play all of Chicago will remember the whole offseason. Brad Muster stuffed on fourth down. Mike Ditka forsaking the field goal, and they lost a whole bunch of momentum there. Bears' only score of the game came off the foot of Kevin Butler, 33 yards. silenced the crowd for just a brief moment. And Hostetler, I'll tell you, looked like a veteran starter all day. Off the play action, he hits Howard Cross, 17-3 Giants. That's the way it stood at halftime. In the third, even when the Bears had it all figured out, Hostetler killed him with his scrambling. He goes right, weaves his way in for another score to make it 24-3. And this one was a game of go for it on fourth in the playoffs. While the Giants were converting, the Bears could not. Tom Zach to Thornton right at the door, but they slam it and don't let him in. And Ditka knew he was just about done at this point. Fourth quarter, T-Zach trying to make anything happen is picked off by Everson Walls, who has new life with the Giants. He cuts it back the other way, dances free for a while to set up another touchdown. And you know who's got to be loving this? Old Dave Duerson. And Parcells goes on to get the punch. The Bears get the gate as they go down by a final of 31-3. As always, no one could have described it better than the old quote master himself. Dan Hampton summed up the game that officially finished his great career by saying, "It was like a Walt Disney movie that ended with a train wreck." Tom shares the locker room wrap-up from the Meadowlands.
Today they were the better team.
Make that clearly the better team. The Giants pounded the Bears to a paltry 27 yards rushing. Even when 2.5 feet were needed to cross the goal line, the Monsters were matched.
Those are plays we can make and probably should make, and we did.
It was non-existent. They had a good game plan to stop the run, put a lot of people up front.
The most important thing you have to do offensively is put the ball in the end zone, and we didn't do a good job of that today.
The Bears were underdogs, but 31-3 in a playoff game? They wouldn't swallow that kind of a thorough beating easily.
Outscored us by 28 points. Their offense, we allowed them to play ball control offense.
Well, they played good defense, but, you know, we just stopped ourselves on a lot of plays, so we just didn't do a very good job. You know, we practice hard, and we look good in practice, and we just need to come out and show everybody what we can do. Or change the games to Wednesday or Thursday.
In life, you only get what you earn, and we didn't earn it today. We played a better football team, and they beat us, and they handled us in a lot of areas that I really didn't think they'd be able to.
The defense was again on the field nearly twice as much as its opponent, but at least that meant the final look at Dan Hampton was that much longer.
The guys that cry, you know, they're the ones that feel like they didn't get it all done. I did all I could. I couldn't do any more. I really honestly couldn't. I have no regrets. You know, a lot of guys have problems getting out of the game because they say, well, if only, see, I poured it out. The bottle's empty. You know, I couldn't go no more. So, all in all, it wasn't a bad run, though.
His personality is something that you can never find. I mean, the chemistry that I have with Dan would always be there with him. So, you know, I just wish him the best.
I'm going to miss his dedication. I'm going to miss his commitment. And most of all, I'm going to miss his heart. You don't find guys like that with that kind of heart very often.
We're very proud of Dan and what he's accomplished in his career and what he's meant to the Chicago Bear organization. It's a shame that it ends this way, but yet he's had so many great moments that he'll be okay in life. Dan's a fighter. He knows how to get down in the trenches and fight for what he has to do, and he'll make it in life pretty darn well.
Thus ends a season in which the Bears rebuilt on the fly and won a total of 12 games, thereby raising expectations. Raising them, however, to heights which they could not reach.
It's not really truly successful unless you go all the way and win the Super Bowl. That's the ultimate goal. But, you know, I think it was an okay season. It gives us something to build on for next year.
We went through some stuff, and I think we showed a lot of character to come back from last year, but obviously we've got a long way to go to go the whole way. So we'll hopefully see what happens.
I'll worry about next year, come tomorrow or August. I mean, heck, it's been a rough year. It's been a very gratifying year, and I think, I'm looking